him. We have heard the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Today we start a sermon series, or at least I do, titled Figuring Out Faith, in which we will take phrases from the hymn, Come Thy Fount of Every Blessing, which we're going to sing after this sermon, and we're going to look at those phrases through the life of Peter. And we're just going to be talking about figuring out faith. Peter was a close friend and follower of Jesus and became one of the most influential people in the 2,000-year history of the Christian church. You know the Gospel of Mark, right? Well, did you know that should actually be called the Gospel of Peter? Because Mark was a companion of Peter and listened to Peter's teaching material, and they compiled Peter's teaching material and sermons. Interesting, huh? But Peter wasn't always a friend of Jesus, and he wasn't always a follower. As a matter of fact, Peter started out just like you and I start out. Peter started out as a stranger. Someone had to introduce him to Jesus, and we talked about that a little bit last week. And Jesus sought him out, just like Jesus seeks you out. Now, what do I mean by Jesus seeks you out? What I mean is that Jesus meets you where you are. That's why I said at the beginning of the worship service, and I think I have a run of like 323 Sundays in a row, no matter who you are, no matter where you are in your life or your faith, you're welcomed here. Jesus meets us where we are. But what I also mean by that is this, is that the teachings of Jesus are so special and that they are so profound that they can change your life forever, right? So usually when a pastor says something you agree with, you might say something, right? Oh, yeah, there we are. Okay, all right. There we are. And I also mean that the person, like who Jesus is as a person, is so special and unique that when you actually read about his life and you get to know him through his teachings, that it's as if you're getting to know him like you know your spouse or your best friend. Isn't it interesting? So when you're reading the Gospels, it's as if you're getting to know Jesus. So then it feels like when Jesus is talking to Peter, Jesus is actually talking to you. You ever felt like that? Yeah. So the universe, the cosmos, is 3.7 billion years old. And thus far, about 117 billion humans have existed. There has never been any one person like Jesus Christ, right? And that one person seeks after you. So what does he think about you? What does it tell you about the heart of God that Jesus Christ would meet you where you are? Why would somebody that special meet you where you are and not demand that you meet him where he is? But he comes where we are. He seeks us out. So, it's so special, and he's so special, and he's so kind that it is like he's talking to Peter and to Andrew and to John and Nathaniel, but it's like he's talking to us. Dear sister, dear daughter, dear son, I know you've been awake into the night and you're tired and your nets are empty, but I'm asking you to trust me one more time. Can we go out together and put our nets down once again into deep water and see if we can't find an answer to what's worrying you? But first, we were strangers, and then we became friends. And I don't know about you, this is my 30th year being a friend of Jesus. And there's no friend like Jesus. And my life is filled with wonderful people, but there's no one like Jesus. I mean, I have 100 friends. There is no one like Jesus. No one like Jesus. So, for those of you who are benefited by an organized pastor, I'm doing you a favor. I will summarize the sermon, okay? I'll do it for you, all right? Jesus sought us as strangers, and he calls us to follow him as a friend. And he asks us to leave everything that we've ever known and to trust him into an unknown future and to figure it out as we go. And that is what we call Christianity. Peter's faith is going to look different than Andrew's faith or John's faith. And therefore, your faith is going to look different than anyone else's faith because your life circumstances are different than anyone else's in this room. Right? So therefore, your faith is going to look different than anyone else's. So what it looks like for you to be a Christian is going to look different than anyone else's. That's why I love being pastor of this congregation, because you know what I'm not interested in? Is becoming a factory where we just pump out Christian robots. Where there's one way to be a Christian. Have you even paid attention to how complex this world is? And how sophisticated life becomes real quick? You know how I think about it? I think about it like this. When my kids were young, Barb, my wife, would take them to the store to pick out a new pair of shoes. It was like a holiday for them, all right? So they would come home, they would celebrate. I'd get home from work, Dad, you have to see these shoes, okay? Bright designs, lights on the bottom, neon laces or Velcro or whatever it is. And they would sometimes wear those shoes until the soles wore out, right? And then one day it would happen, we would say, hey, we've got to go to the store, go put on your shoes. And then they would say, I'm not putting on my shoes. What? Like, go put on your shoes before I give away your inheritance. Like, go put on your shoes. I don't want to go to the store, and I'm not putting on my shoes. And so then we do it, Barb and I would do a checklist. Like, they've had breakfast, so they're not hungry. It's nowhere near their nap time, so they're not tired. They've been happily playing, so it doesn't look like they're sick, and they don't have a fever, and they typically love going on errands, so something else is going on. And then we get to the issue. And it took us years to figure this out. And do you know what it is? The core issue is not about going to the store, and it's actually not about wearing the shoes. Well, actually it is. The core issue is that they've grown, and that the shoes that they used to love now causes them pain, because the shoes that they love no longer fits them. And the core issue is not negative. The core issue is growth, and growth is not a negative, right? So what do Barb and I do in response to that? Hey, we understand. Look at how big Dad is. He understands growth, right? He understands the growth. So let's go to the store and pick out a new pair of shoes that give you space to grow. I get to pick shoes? Yes, that's what you did 3 months ago. Right? But they don't remember it. And when you buy shoes for kids, you don't buy them snug shoes, right? You give them space to grow into. You buy shoes that are bigger. And they become bigger, and the shoes become bigger. Pain and discomfort is only a signal. Doesn't make them a bad kid, right? No, not at all. And this is going to happen for the next 15 years. Growth, pain, choice. Growth, pain, choice. Many of us grew up with a faith that we loved. And then life got complicated. Right? And then our faith no longer fit us. I just want to know, kind of judging right now, if I'm hitting the target. Am I on the dartboard? Okay. And so what are we tempted to do? We're tempted to just throw the faith in the back closet. Right? Right? But we look at our faith that we grew up with and we say, but I love it. I don't want to throw it away. So what's my choice? And what I'm telling you, and I hope it's good news for you, is that the pain you feel when Christianity, like that young faith that you had, it was good. It got you that far in your life. That's a good thing. But the growth that you have is not a negative. You're growing as an individual. You're maturing. That's a good thing. And so you actually have more choices than to throw your faith away. The hard experiences and the frustrations you feel may be signaling, hey, maybe I've just grown past the limits of easier answers, and I need to grow a bigger faith. And maybe for a while in my life, I needed the narrow boundaries of faith, because I think most kids do. They need black and white, right? They need black and white. They need yes and no answers. And then they become teenagers. And then they start seeing in between colors, right? It's beautiful to see. It's hard. It gets harder. But then you come to a point, I need a bigger faith because my life is more complex. And you know what you do? You go to college, and you know what college is? That's when you go shopping for new ideas. Right? Does this make sense to you? Right. And how beneficial would it be if the Christian church would have just told teenagers and parents this, you don't have to throw it away. And if the questions that all of us have, because some of us stopped growing, but our faith, our life continued to be more complex, right? And so you may be 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 years old, but has your life become less complex? No. So our faith is always growing, right? It becomes more complex. Yes? Because we're always facing more questions that I thought I would never be thinking about this, right? So I'm validating everybody in this room right now. And the question is this: how are we going to learn how to build a faith that is as big as God? Yep. And Peter had to learn this because in our passage, which I'm about to get into, his life has become unmanageable and overwhelming, and it has brought him to his breaking point, and he has to grow beyond his first faith. And Jesus invites him to grow into a new, bigger faith. But Peter has to figure it out. So soon after following Jesus, Peter has gotten a phone call from his wife, which we are allowed to overhear. Sweetheart, I need you to come home right now. It's Mom. I don't know. She's just started feeling bad. She has a fever. The doctors don't know what it is. They've given her antibiotics. They've ordered tests. She's resting now. She's asleep. No, she's not eating anything. Luke, the author of our passage, is a physician by trade. So in the original language, it literally reads, she was besieged and tortured by a scorching heat. Our English translation says she has a high fever, right? So we could read that and think, too bad they didn't have Tylenol. Besieged and tortured by a scorching heat, so much so that they called a rabbi. Would that not be the equivalent of calling the priest for last rites? Put yourself in that situation. Many of you know what that's like. You know what it feels like when your body is on high alert when you hear the phone ring? Peter and his wife are going through that. They're having to shuffle their schedules. And imagine Peter, because in the passage before this, Jesus goes into a synagogue and he is healing the loved ones of people that Jesus doesn't even know. But Peter is his friend. But he hasn't healed Peter's mother-in-law. What? So make it make sense, Jesus. You ever ask that question? Why is this happening to me? I'm closer to you than 99% of people around me. Why is this happening to me? Haven't I prayed enough? And there's more to her illness. 94% of the people living in the under the Roman Empire live in subsistence, meaning they did not know where their food was coming tomorrow. So they're on the borderline of malnutrition, and now she's sick. Her body has no reserves. Ooh. And so Peter doesn't have savings. Like, are you kidding me? Nobody had savings. To miss a day of work is to miss a payment or to go into debt. So it meant then what it means now. It means, like, how do we pay for her medical care? Having to choose between clothes for the kids or food or medical care. Some things never change. And so Peter and his family are in a vulnerable position. And so you could understand why Peter is relieved that Jesus heals her. But you can understand the night before Jesus comes over, like all the what-if statements, like, what if she doesn't wake up? What am I going to do, Peter? I don't know. Do you want to stay up with her? No, I work at night, which is Peter working at night. He works at night as a fisherman. He's a business owner. He employs others in a commercial fishing business. He works at night. Why? Why does Peter fish at night? Well, now we fish with nylon fishing nets. Fish don't see those. Well, they seem to see mine, but they don't see most people's nylon fishing nets. But the nets that Peter and other people used were made of flax or linen, so they fished at night because the fish were less likely to see those nets, so the fishermen fished at night. And the boats that they used were 23 feet long, 7 feet wide, so like a size of a nice pickup truck. All right? They would have 4 or 5 workers per boat, so Peter has employed in this passage 10 people. He has to pay 9 other people, and he comes up empty-handed. Have you ever tried to pay 10 people? Yikes. After having medical debt, think about Peter's situation here. So they would throw out fish, and these were bell nets, so the nets were shaped like bells. They had weights on the end. And so they'd throw out the nets, and they would sink. They would wait for the fall. The fish would get caught up in the nets, and they could do this once every hour. So throw it, let it sink for 30, 40 minutes, wait, and 20 minutes to pull it up. Okay? That's what's going on here. So they could do this 8 times in a night. And that night they did it 8 times, and they caught nothing but weeds. The sun's rising. Boys, go home to your family. I'm calling it. Maybe tomorrow. Let's clean the nets. And they start rowing back to the shore, and they see a crowd forming on the shore. They don't know what's really going on there. And as Peter has to be thinking, like, how am I going to pay these guys? They've got families relying on them, just like my family's relying on me. How am I going to figure this out? Empty nets lead to empty pockets lead to empty mouths. And so he gets to the shore, they're pulling the weeds out of the nets, and then Jesus says, hey, this crowd is really pushing on me. Can I use your boat as a pulpit? Peter says, yeah, help yourself. And so Peter has worked through the night, hasn't slept, has cleaned his nets, and then Jesus says, hey, can we go fishing? And Peter says, oh, dude, I'm tired. I'm tired. Have you ever been there? Like, I just did what you're asking me, and now you say it's going to be different this time. Really? You ever been there? Yeah, like you've gone through it enough, and you say, I'm tired. Like, shouldn't I get like a Letterman's jersey out of this? Like, I've put in enough experience out of this. Notice what Peter says. I'll do it because you said please. So he has a little attitude with it. Because you asked, I'll do it. And if you've been where Peter has been, which is in a silent bedroom, and if you've been where Peter has been, where you have more days at the end of the month than you have money, and if you've been where Peter has been, where you think that you're going to let down the people who depend upon you the most, then you know that Jesus is asking him to do the hardest thing, which is to think that this time it can be different with God's help. Is that not the hardest thing at all? Because he is just retreading the same water, but Jesus is asking him, but this time it can be different. Will you believe? And so they go out to the deep water, and they throw down their nets, 2 boats, they throw down their nets. They wait for 30 minutes. Had to be the longest 30 minutes, right? And they pull it up. You ever wonder what kind of fish they are? You ever wonder? I can tell you. Tilapia. Based on archaeological evidence. Tilapia. You ever think about that? 1,000 pounds of tilapia. Slapping Jesus in the leg. In a boat. Drowning in the blessings of God. Because Jesus was willing to give an opportunity for Peter to grow. And Peter was willing to put on the next size shoe. But then Peter, you see, that's interesting because Peter says, Lord, I'm a sinful man. Let's think about it. You know what I think it is? I'll put it another way. I think that, all right, so you have to imagine, like, they just caught 1,000 pounds of fish. It's a lot of fish. It pays everybody's, like what I think, like, Peter basically walks away from everything, right? So Peter is taking care, Jesus is taking care of everybody's family at that point, right? Because he has, 4, 8, so he has 7 other people with him, and he just pays everybody and says, Peter is going with me. It's pretty interesting, right? But here Peter with like 1,000 pounds of tilapia at his feet, but he looks down at his feet, and he looks down at the spiritual shoes that he put on this morning, and he sees that his toes are sticking out at the end. And he puts on the shoes that Jesus just got him, and he makes his toes pop up, and he realizes that there's a big gap at the end. And who he is now and who Jesus is calling him to be, that he has a lot of growth to become the man that God wants him to be. And he says, oh God, I got a lot of growing up to do. So no wonder he says that. And who of us has not faced a circumstance where we say, oh my God, how am I going to do this? I've been there. I've been there. This passage comes alive. So how do we figure out faith? I will tell you this, and I've thought about this for so long, and I think that I'm about to tell you the hardest thing I've told you in 7.5, and this is the hardest thing you're going to have to believe, and sometimes I believe it. Okay, did you hear what I just said? Sometimes I believe it. and it's this. To grow in your faith, you have to believe the hardest thing. And the hardest thing is this, is at the center of the story is not you. But a God whose heart is full of love and whose hands are capable and who is asking you to trust and to leave the familiar and to put on new shoes that are much bigger than what you've ever been used to wearing before, and to simply put one foot in front of the other and trust. That's the hardest truth. And we will throw our nets in all kind of water for that not to be true. We will. We will throw our nets in all kind of water for that not to be true. And that's why I ask you to turn to John 21. Okay, John 21. John 21, starting in verse 1. After these things, so Jesus has been resurrected, but Peter doesn't know kind of what to make of it yet. So after these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, and he showed himself in this way. Gathered there together were Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the son of Zebedee, and two other of his disciples. Simon Peter said to them, I am going fishing. They said to him, we will go with you. They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. And just after daybreak, Jesus stood on the beach, but the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, children, you have no fish, have you? They answered, no. He said to them, cast the net to the right side of the boat, and you will find some. So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because there were so many fish. That disciple who Jesus loved said to Peter, it is the Lord. Verse 15. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my sheep. A second time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, tend to my sheep. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter felt hurt because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know that I love you. You know everything. You know that I love you. Feed my sheep. Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fashion your own belt and go wherever you wish. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will fashion a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go. He said this to indicate the death by which he would glorify God. After this, he said to him, follow me. Verse 20, Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them. He was the one who had reclined next to Jesus at the supper and had said, Lord, who is it that is going to betray you? When Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, Lord, what about him? Jesus said to him, if it's in my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? Follow me. Okay, I'll end with this. Give me 2 minutes. Peter had followed Jesus for 3 years. And then Jesus had died. And once again, Peter is faced with an insurmountable question. And what does he want to do? He wants to go back to the familiar. What does Peter say? I want to go fishing. I want to go back to the shoes that used to fit me. You and I both know that life doesn't exist anymore. This story in John mirrors the story in Luke. They go out in a boat, they throw their nets, they cast nothing. Jesus is unknown on a beach, gives them the command to trust his word and to do something different. And they catch so much fish they almost sink. And it's only then when they trust him that they realize who he is. Another transfiguration. When they see Jesus as he truly is. Jesus then tells Peter, Peter, I love you and you love me. But you all are about to have to go into this crazy, wild, complex world and scatter and tell everyone the good news of the gospel. And then Peter says, but what about John? And Jesus says, it's not your business to worry about John. You follow me. In other words, put on your shoes that are made for you and start walking. What Lent is about, friends, and I realize I'm going long, what Lent is about is you and I figuring out what size Jesus Christ is asking us to put on. And listen, you may say, Jason, I don't have a lot of faith. Half sizes are okay. Half sizes are okay. Jesus meets you where you are. Jesus said, if you have faith as a mustard seed, half sizes are okay, friends. Enough to know the next step. Just make the next step. So let me ask you a few questions. Where are you casting the nets and coming up empty? They tried for 8 hours and came up empty. We will keep trying and trying, expecting something different. Okay? Where are you coming up empty? Where do you need Jesus' wisdom in your life? Okay? 2 more. In Lent, as you pray, what do you need to leave behind? And then this. What's the half-ton blessing that you're praying for? Because Lent is not negative. Lent is a positive, right? You may not be praying for tilapia, but aren't you asking for some blessing, some movement of God in your life? Look at this. Doesn't this sanctuary look like a boat? We're all in this journey together. And so we can share in the blessing together, and we will help you. So friends, I think we all have to lace up. Let's trust in God together. Amen.